alive!
How do we know she is alive?
I hate when people talk during the movie. No wire hangers ever! You're tearing me apart, Lisa!
Your stupid minds! Stupid! Stupid!
Relax. It's all in bad taste.
Hello and welcome to the Bad Taste Buds pod.
Just gonna let Jack do it from now on.
Hey.
I've got my actual intro now because I've been practicing this.
Water.
Damn it, you piece
Fire.
of shit!
Is that it? Is that it? It's so predictable, man.
Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when M. Night Shyamalan attacked. Only the Bad Taste Buds, master of crap, can rid him a new arsehole and tear his film to shreds.
I was kind of hoping you were going to do the Insane Clown Posse one instead with
Which
water,
ones?
fire, earth and dirt. Fucking magnets. How do they
How
work?
do they work? Welcome to the Bad Taste Buds, guys, the podcast where we make sure the people who shat all over your favourite childhood cartoon face swift and severe punishment.
Yep, another week, another bastardization of a loved IP.
We're doing Last Airbender, by the way, the M. Night Shyamalan bastardization of the beloved Nickelodeon classic, created by Michael DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. This was something that's very near and dear to all of our hearts, I know for a fact. I actually didn't end up watching this until I was in uni. Ryan, you were the one who introduced this to me. Everyone's here, by the
Sorry
way.
for that as well.
Everyone's here, so yeah, Ryan's here.
They call me Mr. Glass. But you can call me On.
All right. And Hannah's here.
Hey.
And Jack is here as well.
Don't feed the unagi.
I'm just sitting here like, I don't know what's happening. I'm sure this is...
what the unagi is.
Salmon skin roll.
Yeah, it's time of fish, right?
It looks like a Gyarados,
Yes.
the coast of Kyushu Island.
We
How, eh?
all really like this show, but I'm probably the least, and I'm definitely the least knowledgeable about it. These guys have been
Show,
rattling
not
off.
movie.
Oh yeah, so the TV show which came out in
There is no movie in
2004.
passing, so.
All right, we're just getting all of these out of the way now.
Yeah, is anyone else got any quotes they want to rattle off while we're here? Right, so yeah, today we're talking about M. Night. Just when you think I couldn't make anything worse than happening, Shyamalan, he comes along and makes The Last Airbender. Which, before we fully get into The Last Airbender deep dive, I think we might all need a quick history lesson on M. Night Shyamalan, just to get. I mean, you two definitely need a history lesson. So M. Night he's an Indian-American filmmaker, and he started to achieve notoriety around the early 90s, the mid-90s, with his directorial debut, Praying with Anger, which I don't know anyone who's seen this movie. But I know it's a super low-budget movie that he himself stars in, so I think that's the origins of him kind of making his cameos in his movies. He always kind of wanted to be a bit of an actor-director kind of type, and he's not made to be an actor. I mean, you saw him in Signs, didn't you? Like he was the preacher in Signs.
He was passable, but he was nothing special.
No, nothing special at all. And you see that's kind of a running theme in his films. He rates himself as a bit of an actor. Fast forward to his pretty forgettable sophomore film, Wide Awake, and we get to the year 1999, which for a lot of people, one of the greatest years in cinema history. You have films like The Matrix, The Iron Giant, The Mummy. This was like a seminal year for films. And in late November that year, one little ghost story on a budget of only 40 million comes out, and that little film is The Sixth Sense, and it took the world by absolute fucking
People
storm.
still talk about that to this day. Like, I see dead people is one of the most quotable lines.
You called it a sixth sense
Did I
about
say
7
Sixth
times.
sense.
I think this is genuinely a
Sixth
word I
Sense.
can't
Because
say.
7, 8, 9.
I can't say the word sense.
Sense.
Sense. But when you add the word six in front of it, it's fucking
You've got
difficult.
And a
Sixth sense. It is a bit of a...
It's a fuck up. It's a
big
you
sense.
fucked up there, didn't you? Shyamalan was immediately thrust into stardom after that movie. Like, he was the poster boy for the early 2000s directorial scene. I remember being a wee sprog obsessed with this guy, similar to Kelly and Donnie Darko.
That happened. That accent happened.
The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable were two of those films that I was completely obsessed with.
I'm still obsessed with Unbreakable. I will watch Unbreakable right now and thank you for the experience.
I mean, they're both absurdly brilliant films in their own right. Unbreakable being one of the most underrated superhero films of all time. But a lot of what they hinge on, a lot of what made M. Night the household name that he is the brilliance of their twists. And this is where he was kind of pigeonholed, I think.
Didn't you say that his name is sort of like used as
A Shyamalanian twist. That's what a lot of people call it.
There's
yeah.
a Rick and Morty episode called M. Night Shyamalan or something.
Yeah.
Like that. It's a simulation inside of a simulation inside of another
He became
simulation.
famous because of his twists, which I think is a really tricky position to be in as a
it puts
director.
a lot of pressure on someone.
How do you follow up two staggeringly successful films?
With The Happening.
I mean, The Happening came a lot later. So he goes and makes what I think is 90% a perfect film with Signs. Really, really tense, really scary. And then again, he thinks he has to add a twist in the end. Only here, the twist
It's water.
completely falls on its face.
And God. Don't forget it's also
Water and
God.
God.
Is he religious?
A lot of his films deal with religious like aspects and implications and stuff. The fate of humanity and stuff like that. I think there are some religious elements there, but I'm not sure to what extent.
So in 10 years, we're definitely going to find him starting a cult.
For all intents and purposes, Signs should be one of the best films of all time, and yet you have that ending akin to just perfect ways to fuck up a perfect movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where his downfall began. And then we kind of fast forward a few years and we have The Last Airbender, which is him trying something completely different. And it fucks up even worse. It fucks up even harder.
I think what Science does really well, I think typically in the horror trope, as soon as you see the creature, it's no longer scary.
Oh, 100%.
And there's so many great like scenes where the music's incredibly tense, but you're just looking at the actors reacting to the monster rather than seeing it for yourself. And you're seeing Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix just be like, fuck,
Or
at
Bruce
this
Willis
thing.
if you're Hannah.
Yeah, well, sorry for context there. Hannah's went, hey, he really likes Bruce Willis, doesn't he?
Podcast, guys.
And to be fair, he does really like Bruce Willis, but Hannah thought at the time Mel Gibson was Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Late. I'd have made the mistake.
You would have.
But yeah, I think a common horror trope is as soon as you see the scary thing, it's no longer scary.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think the baiting and the pacing of that continued the fear aspect really well with that. You only ever saw snippets or snapshots of the thing, and it helped build that tension there. Whereas normally, once you've seen the monster in a horror film, it's no longer scary.
It's the Steven Spielberg thing. It's the Jaws thing. As soon as you show the shark, you want to hide it. The audience envisions the shark twice as big if you don't show us it. But absolutely, we kind of look at the films that preceded it as well. You have the Village, which is a hokey bullshit twist and super boring. Lady in the Water, another fucking terrible, nuts, impossible to comprehend film. The Happening, which is actually one of my favorite movies of all time because it's completely absurd and completely. This is one we're going to cover on the podcast because it was definitely the one that kind of tanked his career as far as those suspense films go. I think The Happening was the one before Last Airbender, actually. It was the penultimate film that he did in his style, and it's so bad. If you were excited to watch Mark Wahlberg talk to plants for an hour and a half, that's the film for you. The guy fully lost his groove, and The Last Airbender might have been his biggest diversion of his career.
Has he done much good since?
He came back. He did actually come back after Last Airbender. He did a film called After Earth, which was basically a Will Smith project, which was the Scientologist movie.
Yeah, I feel like I remember
Really bad.
that.
A film called The Visit, which really, really kind of brought him back into, there is a ray of hope for this guy. Maybe he can. Because, again, it's a very low budget, very simple plot. There is a twist in it, but the twist was well thought out. It works. It's interesting. And again, it's low budget, and it lends to the kind of atmosphere that he creates. And then he fucked it up again with Glass. So, he's definitely one of the more interesting directors to follow the career of. He's almost an enigma in the sense that you can't quite place whether he's one of the best directors of all time or just absolutely atrocious.
Nicolas Cage of directors.
Literally, it depends on the day whether or not you're getting a good Shyamalan film or a bad Shyamalan
It's
film.
been a long time since I've been excited for one of his movies.
But
I'll be
yeah,
honest.
Today is not that day, though.
It's not that day.
I would. But then again, if he came out one, I would watch it the day of release. I am that kind of guy who would just be drawn straight to watch it because there's something so curious about the way he makes films. What is he? I'm a massive M. Night fan. I learned a few days ago, I think it was like 2 days ago when I texted you two, that you guys haven't seen anything that M. Night's done, and
Well,
I'm
that's-
just baffled.
That's not quite true. I've seen,
Anything?
before yesterday,
Yeah.
I've seen Split
Yeah.
and the 1999 classic Stuart Little.
Which he wrote, by the way, didn't direct. But
I
okay.
didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently, I typed in M. Night Shyamalan films and Stuart Little came up.
I think he was he was like a co-writer and a producer of that one. As far as M. Night fanboys in the room, I will go on record to say that I'm a massive fanboy. Obviously, his debut success, it was his third film in his career, but the 1999 Sixth Sense,
Stuart Little, you mean?
was kind of his catapult into success, I'll say. It turned him into kind of an overnight success. It was the one that kind of brought him to the forefront, and he was kind of lauded as being one of the two watch directors for the longest time. And then obviously he kind of followed that up with Unbreakable, which is a massive cult hit. And then he followed up with Signs, which is one of my all-time favorite horror films up until the very end, obviously. And this was kind of when we saw the beginning of the end for the career of M. Night Shyamalan.
This is where I demoted him. He stopped being M. Night Shyamalan, became M. Night Shyamalan.
Midnight.
Me and Hannah,
You don't get the dot.
me and Hannah literally just watched that last night in preparation.
Yeah, because
for
I
the pod.
made you.
Yeah. All right. No, I was browsing what to watch, and I was like, "Ooh, Shazam's on Amazon Prime now." But no, we have to watch another fucking M. Night Shyamalan film and
sad.
do my homework.
Shazam's so much better.
You know what? Signs was an 8 out of 10, maybe a 9 out of 10 for 3/4 of the film, and then the last 15 minutes were just a complete fucking shit show.
It is notoriously one of the worst endings in film history. That and War of the Worlds often go together as far as like what kind of bargain basement kindergarten bullshit do you think I'm buying into?
The shittiest Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, well, there's just like lazy. I don't know how to end my film, so I don't know. Water. Just
Water. Yes.
I think he must have looked around the room.
The alien population that's allergic to water is going to visit a planet that's 70% water. And what was it that you said? What do they do?
What happens when it rains?
They bring umbrellas.
Or what happens when, like, I don't know, a kid with a fucking super soaker splashes water and it's like, oh, well, that's how we do it. You don't need the army, just get
Arm the children.
arm the children.
Yeah, they lived outside his fucking house for weeks. You're telling me it didn't rain once?
Well, this is the thing. So, obviously, Sixth Sense was one of the greatest successes in cinema history, let's say. On a budget of like 40 million, I think they made Sixth Sense on. It made like 800 million back. So it almost like, wow. I don't even know what, that's math I can't do. Like, that's how well it did. So he was kind of catapulted straight away in there with magazines. I remember reading magazines at the time that were kind of lauding him as the next coming of Steven Spielberg, and this was the one to watch. And he had a shit ton of pressure on his shoulders. And I think a lot of what made his later films train wreck cinema almost with those terrible endings was the weight on his shoulders, was the pressure to kind of live up to the expectations of his first film.
That he had to give a twist.
Because that's what made him who he was. So obviously Sixth Sense, one of the most iconic twists. If you haven't seen it by now, you're Hannah and Jack. But
I feel like I've seen it. I feel like I know all of the major plot hooks and punches and the big twist at the end. So I feel like I'm not going to waste 2 hours.
Signs was definitely the beginning of the end, because as you guys say, it's one of my favorite. It probably would have been my favorite M. Night film had it not had that bullshit 10 minutes at the end.
It was like brilliant, to be fair, most of the way through. Like the acting was great, the directing was great, like the film, like how they filmed it was great. Like
it's a tense movie.
The script was great, and then they just get to the next last 10 minutes and it's like they go, just chuck some water on them and be done with it. And it's like,
God is real and aliens are allergic to water.
oh.
And as M. Night layman's, you then probably won't know kind of what was to follow either, because Signs was just the beginning. If we're talking about true train wrecks, you have to follow it up with things like The Village, which might have these somehow even stupider ending. Now, I won't ruin it in case you do end up watching The Village at some point, but those of you who are listening who've watched The Village, you're probably aware of the ending. Again, it just seems like he was trying to follow it up with, I'm the twist guy, I've got to...
I think the overall movie is dull.
Yeah, the Village is the first one where the actual film itself, quality-wise, really dips, because it just feels like the entire film is based on the twist, rather than, like, he's not really bothered about the first 90 minutes that happen, he's only bothered about that last 10 minutes, and it's kind of definitely... You start to see his exterior as the next big thing start to crumble, I think, and then he follows it up with Lady in the Water. It goes to the point where he can't really make much as far as box office returns at that point. This is where you really see him kind of slip into a director who is not a bankable name anymore.
But I think that's always the case when you've got someone who delivers something absolutely phenomenal. I mean, look at the Donnie Darko's, Richard Kelly, and you try and constantly live up to that bar that you've set yourself so early on. It's not something that you've built up to. It's like your sort of defining thing, and it's come so early on that you spend the rest of your career trying to almost catch a goalpost that you just is not there. Like.
See, the only one I've seen, other than the classic Stuart Little 1996.
Are you going to spend this entire podcast talking about Stuart Little?
No, maybe.
Ratatouille could take Stuart Little.
No, but just saying. Let's that's a tangent I'm not willing to go down right now. But no, the only one for me that was like another, other than Signs that we saw last night, was I don't know when it came out, 2014
Split. It was like 2014, 2015, yeah.
Which, again...
It was the schizophrenic one, right?
Yeah, so there's going to be spoilers for this one, I think.
Spoiler alert.
I don't think it wasn't advertised as a kind of sequel or whatever to Unbreakable. It was presented as this big case study on this guy with multiple personality disorders. It looked like it was deep diving into sort of mental health and a bit of a sort of psychological horror film at times. And I was like, right, I'm totally on board for this, and it was great. And again, just like the last 15 minutes or something, it just completely went off the fucking rails. So again, I'm gonna spoil this film. So turn you.
It's too late now.
Yeah, fuck it. It's been out 7 years. You should have seen it by now if you were going to. But James McAvoy, has this multiple personalities, and then all of a sudden he's fucking crawling up walls, and like he's actually like one of his personalities they refer to throughout the film as the Beast. And it turns out like he is superhuman strength and things when he's in this form, and it's just like, oh, fuck off. It was like it just feels incredibly insensitive from a mental health perspective.
Oh,
but, and again, like it was just a shitty twist. I feel like it like what sold the film was that sort of grounded approach, that really sort of close quarters, sort of psychological, intense scariness of like what's he gonna do next. He's like, you know, this kind of very unstable, unpredictable character, and then he just fucking hulks out at the end, and it's just and then just ruins all of the immersion. And then you just see Bruce Willis in a fucking coffee shop at the end of it or something, and then that's why it's linked into the others.
It's a good actor in a bad movie. Like, I want to give a shout out to James McAvoy.
Oh, his performance is exceptional, all the way through. It's well filmed. This is the problem, because for me, M. Night, or M. Night, whatever we're going to call him at any given time, he's a phenomenal director, and he knows his way around a camera. He knows how to build tension. He knows how to direct actors. He just seems, again, a little bit like Kelly. Like, he's often too ambitious, or just hung up and kind of trips over his own ambition or his own kind of self-doubt almost. And I do feel like, Jack, you're absolutely right with Split. This really cool movie that has the potential to be a really grounded, really tense horror film that he's like, actually, I'm going to tie it into my superhero universe that I'm going to build. I'm like, dude, calm down. No, you're doing well. You're doing so well.
So is that the trilogy? Is it a superhero-esque?
So it starts with Unbreakable, which was in 2001, I think that came out.
And that was the one that came out first.
Yeah, and then he followed up with Split a full 15 years after, which, again, it didn't tie in until the last 10 minutes, that's what Jack is saying. They do this big reveal at the end where Bruce Willis's character from Unbreakable shows up at a coffee shop.
So was that in itself meant to be a twist?
So it was kind of, Split was kind of sold as this sort of psychological film, and then it turns out it's basically just a supervillain origin story in a nutshell, because then they move on to a film called Glass, which ties the two together.
Which is also apparently dire.
Glass is very boring. Glass is dull as dishwater. Glass was meant to be kind of the finale of this trilogy, and it was meant to bring all these characters together. Obviously, Mr. Glass, Samuel L. Jackson's character from Unbreakable, he was probably the standout from that film, and he was the one everyone gravitates towards.
He was such a good villain. His bones are made of glass, and he caused...
Sound like a good villain.
He caused destruction and mayhem and like blew up hotels or trains, trapped people in fire.
So he's literally a glass cannon.
He's literally a glass cannon. He doesn't have any powers. He's just got money and shit.
Hang on, right? So he's got no powers. He's made of glass. I'm so confused.
He's looking for a superhero because he considers himself to be like the kid made of glass. He has this power, but it's a shit power. He wants to find the unbreakable person, Bruce Willis.
Right, okay.
So he causes all this destruction and damage, looking for someone to be the sole survivor to find out if that person has superpowers. So he's not like...
To do what? What's his end game?
He just wants superheroes and villains. He's a massive nerd.
Which is why Unbreakable's cool as shit. Like, Unbreakable is that kind of the underground cult superhero film for people who don't like superheroes but actually kind of do like superheroes.
Because it catches you off guard, Hannah. He's not portrayed as a villain immediately. He's Mr. Glass. He's come and found Bruce Willis and been like, I have this sad story.
This
with my
podcast
bones
has just evolved into Ryan explaining the plot to Unbreakable.
And then he's trying to help Bruce Willis.
What movie are we doing this week?
Mr. Glass is exceptional, and I'm just mad about this.
There's a little bit because
he does get some mint actors though, doesn't he? Like the cast in some of his films are fantastic.
I'll tell you who's not great acting in M. Night films, and that's M. Night, who always acts in M. Night films. Because the guy. This is the problem. I do think it's a little bit of an ego thing, and I do resonate massively. Like, I'm a massive fan of M. Night. In the same way, I
thought you were going to say you're a massive egotist.
Well, I'm a massive egotist as well. If you've listened to the podcast thus far, but I absolutely think directors I adore: Sam Raimi, David Cronenberg, David Lynch. But M. Night is also up there in my top 5 favorite directors of all time, and yet he's made some of the absolute worst films of all time as well.
Did you say this was our lowest rated film?
This is our lowest 5% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is bad.
I'm not going to lie, I'm going to take this film very, very personally.
Can you imagine how excited I was though? Like, Unbreakable is one of my favourite movies. It is fantastic, and I loved it so much. In my excitement, again, M. Night to do an Avatar movie,
but then again,
completely failed, crippled me.
Looking at this guy's filmography, as far as who would you pick to make a Last Airbender film, first of all, you shouldn't pick anyone to make a Last Airbender film because there's no point or need or necessity to make a Last Airbender film.
Absolutely.
We will get into why there's no point very shortly, because we're going to discuss just what makes The Last Airbender a phenomenal TV show. And if you haven't seen it, I probably would recommend turning the podcast off and not ruining anything for you. Don't listen to this. Don't listen to the 45.
It's all on Netflix.
Yeah,
go now.
Please watch it. Come back after you finished it, but don't ruin anything for yourself. But there's the last person I would have picked to direct a Last Airbender film is the guy who's known for very low budget, very tense, very sleeper kind of mystery thriller horror films. Like his entire filmography up to the point were horror films.
And he likes to do his own twists and stuff, and instead they're like, here's a bunch of source material, stick to it for your kids.
The twist this time is it's extra shit.
So if you were to pick a director for this film was happening, regardless of whether
Jesus,
you wanted
don't
to
do
or
this.
not.
John
who would it
Favreau.
be?
John Favreau.
Do you think?
Man can do no wrong. He created the
The man
Marvel
also
universe,
did The Lion King.
which I haven't seen. Did he? Did John Favreau do The Lion King?
Yeah.
Yup.
Oh shit. Okay, I take that
That
back.
was the
John
first
Favreau seldom does wrong.
Post 2019 John Favreau. Or sorry.
Okay, well, John Favreau also created Iron Man. Remember,
He
he gave birth to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know,
Yeah.
And The Mandalorian is an absolute masterpiece, which is he co-produced that with Dave Filoni, I believe.
Yeah.
Who is also on Avatar.
Yeah.
He was a big part of the first season of Avatar before he got the job to go work for Star Wars and do the Clone Wars for them.
I mean, that would fit really well because the MCU has a lot of like threads that connect tons of different things together, and that eye for detail would have been really appreciated in the movie Avatar.
Like if you look at like again, I'm going to go into a bit of a Star Wars geeky deep
That
dive
tangent
here.
away. This is
Tangent
the
away.
place for
But if you
tangents.
like, it's just the attention to detail for like loads of little throwbacky things and loads of little lore building things where the two of them working in tandem together would. They really did the IP justice, I think, and I think
it gives the fans something to keep going back to over and over and over to find out more and more.
What's an IP?
independent intellectual property.
IP, for those of you who don't know, means intellectual property.
Thanks, Hannah. Favreau would be a good shot. Again, in my head, I just don't want to see it happen, and I never wanted to see it happen. I remember seeing this when it came out. I think I was 17 years old, and at that point I hadn't, because Ryan, it was you who introduced me to the show. I hadn't seen anything from the show.
Which was your mistake.
Which was my mistake. Because were you guys all fans prior to the movie? Like, were you guys early fans or late fans?
I discovered Avatar in uni, and it was either Jack or Ryan that introduced me to the series. I've never seen the film.
No.
I've never had a desire to see the film because the series ticks every single box I could need for a series of anything ever.
I used to watch it a lot as a kid on Nickelodeon, but I didn't have Nickelodeon. My granddad had it.
Yeah.
So I only ever got like scattershot bits of episodes here and there. I never got to watch it start to finish until it was, I think I did watch it for the first time like end to end at university, or maybe he's in sixth form, access to the internet with perfectly legitimate streaming services and legal means to watch things.
Thanks, Putlocker. No, but I think what does resonate me the most about watching this, because again, I'm with you guys. I didn't watch this until uni, but it's one of those animated films, and you see its bright colors. It's very kid friendly. It's very kind of happy-go-lucky from the outset. But what it does, it's one of those few animated shows that, for me anyway, perfectly balances that line between family friendly and very intellectually mature as well.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the episodes have dark themes, and very, like, kind of themes with heavy implications, things that children, it might go over their heads, but it's one of those ones where you could sit down at any age and enjoy it on multiple levels as well.
What I can't stand when people talk about shows and why they won't watch things like The Last Avatar is because it's a cartoon.
Yeah, you
Like,
say
it's a
that.
cartoon, I'm an adult, I'm not going to
Fuck
watch
right
it.
off.
Like, you can do so much more with an animated series. It gives you so much freedom and expression to do with whatever you like without sort of the constraints of CGI and actors and all that sort of stuff. You can really make the vision in your head an actual reality on the screen, and it's one of the only formats I think you can do that to literally exactly how you picture it.
Damn, well said.
God damn, yeah. Can we have a round of applause? I'm going to add some sound effects in right now.
I gotta go use
Such a
some
good point, though.
sentence out.
It only took 9 episodes.
But could you imagine like a live action Archer, for instance? It would just be like painful to watch. I think those sort of jokes and that sort of humor just wouldn't land in that live action format. It would be awful, wouldn't
My
it?
head doesn't let me like picture the animated style in real life. I'm just picturing humans with those like really hard lines around their face.
I think my brain's picturing John Hamm as Archer for some reason. But yeah,
To be fair, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
but even then, I still don't think he could like carry that.
No. Aisha Tyler looks like Lana, to be fair. She could probably do a live action Lana.
Well, she is, yeah.
And I mean, rest in peace, Jessica Walters. Can I mention that I'm still really sad about Jessica Walters. She was a phenomenal national treasure. Her Lucille Bluth. We talk about everything on this episode. Lucille Bluth, rest in peace. You're an absolute legend. But you're right. Like animated shows, there are some that you watch and you think there's no necessity here. There's no need to transfer this, especially when you get a guy who His entire motivation for doing this was that his kids liked it, which is sweet and well-intentioned, but also...
And money.
He loves kids that much. He would have done his homework otherwise.
I was about to say, didn't you say that he's never actually watched the series?
He hadn't seen the series prior to directing, which maybe just shows how much M. Night doesn't like his kids. Maybe he wanted to ruin it for them. He's like, yo, fuck you.
If it shuts you up, I'll make the movie.
But thankfully, I mean, in recent years, he has looked back on this and said he's very aware. It's not a case of a Verhoeven or a Kelly where he looks back and says, "Oh, I still really like this." He knows that this was a massive low point in his career.
To be fair, Avatar fan base, like
they'll tell him.
They're pretty big. They're pretty staunch on what they love. Like
because this film is shrouded. We are gonna. This is the problem because I think we're all eager to talk about the animated show, but I do want to be careful about not blowing our load too soon because we are going to do a full deep dive.
Is that a problem for you sometimes?
Right. Before we do because we are going to get into the point 5 as to what our feelings on the show are. We are going to talk a little bit about the extended universe, the spin-off show Legend of Korra, and a lot of the novels and comic books I think some of you guys have read. But we are going to mainly focus this episode on the M. Night film. Before we do, I kind of want to chat a little bit about what kind of benders we think each of us would be. First of all, benders for our American listeners in England means a gay person. Bender. But like in a bit of a derogatory way, so if you hear us laughing...
It's died out a bit now,
It has. It's very like an 80s, 90s kind of slang, isn't it?
I think middle school, I remember the word bender being talked about quite a bit.
I did this before you guys, before we went on mic together. I would put... Right, tell me if I'm wrong.
Just we have the definitive authority.
We might have had many a discussion
I don't
about this.
think I'm going to be... So I said Jack would be an earthbender.
Yep. No question.
100%.
Hannah would be a waterbender.
Yep.
Yep.
Ryan would be an airbender.
Yep.
Yep.
And I'm a firebender.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, fuck
Spot on.
yeah.
Yeah.
Only motivations. Jack is solid and grounded. Hannah is the most in control of her emotions and feels the most freely. You only have the 2 gears where you're either off or you're 100% motivated and passionate. Though, I
I was about to say, like, mine was just an insult, but thanks.
And I just do what I want. Like, I'm not wearing underwear right now, and that couldn't be clear.
Shave your head. Shave your head. Shave your head.
Ryan is also basically like Snow White with animals, so that would just like go in with the whole airbender thing.
That was very sweet, thank you.
Another anomaly in this whole production was just why M. Night was chosen as a director, because, again, this guy, no experience with blockbusters, no experience with big budgeted movies. On a budget of 150 million, this one was the lowest income as far as box office returns, making only 40 million back off that. So this one was a massive bomb.
I wonder how much the animated series made off of this.
Off the movie?
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of people kind of saw the movie and were then...
Do you not think
to watch it?
I've not seen the movie, so I honestly don't know. Like, I know it's bad, but I wonder, for young kids especially.
I wonder if there's a debate where people are like,
has...
the movie is terrible, please watch the animated series.
Like,
I've pushed it on people based off them seeing the movie.
If there's anything good to come out of this, I just hope that it's up to the fan base for the actual OG series, yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the problem as well. You get a director who's not well known for making big budget blockbusters, and from my recollection of it when I was 17, it's like well over 10 years ago since I've seen it, it comes across as if someone who has no idea how to make a blockbuster. Like, it's really poorly paced. The special effects are just horrendous. You wouldn't expect 150 million. Again, like with Catwoman, you wouldn't have expected this much money to be spent on such a poor.
I don't know, that CGI cat.
They've got some good sets, and some of the costumes are nice.
Yes.
I haven't seen this, but were you saying it's basically just like season 1 of the show?
Yeah.
It's the first book, pretty much condensed down into they find Aang, they pretty quickly travel to the water tribe.
They find who?
Sorry. But like they skip all the fun stuff where Aang tries firebending for the first time and burns Katara. Like, none of that happens. It's pretty much a straight shot to the air temple. Then I believe they get chased by Zuko and they go straight to the northern water tribe.
One of my weirdest memories from watching it, and again, it has been 10 years, is how underpowered all of the bending actually is. Like, there's one of my...
it's fucking great.
We'll talk about it afterwards, because we are going to do some trailer talk very shortly, guys, and then we will watch the film. But I do remember kind of...
It's pathetically weak. You'll see when we watch
how
it.
most of the bending is portrayed.
But going back to your point of like why he was chosen as a director.
Yeah.
But I thought he wanted to make this film.
His
so was
kids,
he asked?
His kids love the show, and I think he went to the studio with the idea to make this film, and they were like, right, big problem. It was during the time, I think Lord of the Rings had ended. It had been about 5 years since Lord of the Rings ended, and a lot of studios were trying to get those big trilogies. I think it came out around about the same time as something like what's that? What's the book that we really like, me and you, the Northern Lights book. What was the Golden Compass?
Yes.
It was about the same time the Golden Compass came out, the first Golden Compass film, and again, it was a lot of studios trying to make series, and it was when they were trying to push for like trilogies. And I remember distinctly this one ends on that cliffhanger, like we'll make a second one, where it almost feels like a build up to the actual film that they want to make. You get a guy like Shyamalan who doesn't know the source material, and then you also put on top of that the controversies that then surrounded the film when they did have some whitewashing controversies come out, especially with the casting of Katara and Sokka, who I know are both American actors, whereas obviously the Katara and Sokka in the original animated series, they are of Asian descent. I mean, it's
the water tribes are kind of like Inuit almost, aren't they?
I mean, that's one of the other beautiful things about the TV show is how diverse the actual characters are. And then you're right, you get to the film and they cast white actors. They cast kind of the bargain basement American, which I know wasn't M. Night's fault. I know he got a lot of backlash on that, but the only actor who auditioned, who actually wanted to cast, was Noah Ringer, the guy who played Ong.
Ang.
I mean, he's an American actor, and as far as I know, his heritage is like English, Scottish, Welsh, that kind of area.
Yeah, so
he said he has some Native American blood, but
even then, it's an Asian property, right? Like it's a half Asian property anyway.
I mean, the animated show, was it not American ran?
Yeah, it's American ran, but the creators, right? The co-creators.
Yeah, there's two of them. One of them was American and one of them was of Asian descent.
I would love to say they did a good job with the Asian mythology, but I don't know anything about Asian mythology, so I can't really comment on that, you know?
I think, to be fair, I don't know if you can talk about the gender. I mean, this will be more discussed in the point 5. I don't think you can talk about anything outside of the universe, because inside that universe you can obviously see elements of the real life like sort of in it, but it's so sort of wrapped up in its own bubble that it's got its own mythology. Do you know what I mean? It builds it all, and it builds it all brilliantly and beautifully, and it might take sort of tangents from all sorts of places, but I don't think it lends itself to one specific culture.
I get you. But and from what I remember, the film just feels like a completely whitewashed, bastardized American version of. It loses a lot of that identity. I think that the animated show
a lot of characterizations, a lot of those bonds that you see build up over time, a lot of the things they have to face together is just kind of skipped straight over.
Before we get into trailer talks, I think we're about ready to do some trailer talk and get the film on. I think we want to get this.
Yeah, man, half an hour in seems good a time as any to start.
Before we do, I do want to kind of mention, obviously, there is a difficulty and an issue with adapting a lot of animated properties to the big screen. We've seen it before with shows like Dragon Ball Z. What you were saying, Jack, there's other ones.
Ghost in the Shell, Death Note, you know, all of these animes that they've tried to done a live action adaptation of, which have all been a bit of a flop.
Yeah,
a bit.
But again, I think that lends to the creative style that it came from. You can do so much more with animation. And if you take it into a live action, you've got the limitations of the current world you live in.
But you've also got the limitations of a 90 to 120 minute runtime as well, where you've got 3 seasons of lore, you've got 3 seasons of character development that you've got to squeeze into a 90-minute film. It's always going to suffer because of it. I think you see here more than anything, which is surprising because I think this was one of the first ones. Obviously, Ghost in the Shell came out recently. Dragon Ball came out, I think, a few years before, but Death Note came out recently. They're still trying to adapt a lot of anime to the big screen. It just seems massively unnecessary. And what are they doing recently? They're doing a TV show adaptation of this as well, aren't they? Live action.
Yeah. And I think the fan base is sort of like,
cautious.
Where's that still live action? I thought they changed
no,
this.
it's going to be live action, and according to what I've read recently, they're different sort of like the ages and all like the dynamics and.
Just get someone who appreciates the source. No, it doesn't need it, but if you're going to do it, get someone who appreciates the source. I think there is a good chunk
of like people who are involved in the animated Last Airbender series who are involved in the project. I don't know if that's still the case. I was on the subreddit for The Last Airbender a while ago, and I'm pretty sure they said someone who was a big part of players left the project and things, but I don't know.
We'll hold on.
DiMartino's still doing it, so like he's a big driving force. And if you have him who did create it, you think he would at least do a better job than M. Night. They still have a TV show format, so they can still run it.
Yeah, I think
time.
Doing it as a TV show format is better because you've got how many minutes of it in the...
And graphics have came a long way as well.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
You'll see when we watch the trailer in the movie how bad bending is in their universe. So if they fix that, they might be on to a win.
Right. That's a beautiful segue there, Ryan. Thank you very much for lending me that. And let's get on to watching some trailer talk.
Yeah.
Watching trailer talk?
I don't know. Listening to trailer talk? Trailer talk. Trailer talk.
are the last of your kind. All that remains of a once powerful nation.
I knew you were real. I always knew you returned.
So why did he have a fucking cross tattooed on the back of him? Has he got like love and hate on his knuckles, and only God can judge me as well? That's just like
part of the Crips. Like, you don't know.
It's just like generic fucking like pretty boy tattoos there, rather than like actual like. Oh,
my biggest takeaway through that entire trailer is my brain was just, this is gonna suck.
I'm not gonna lie. Out of all the films we have done so far, there has been a level of I'm kind of excited to watch how bad this is going to be. I'm not.
There's no personality
if
to
you
it.
told me right now, right, that's it, guys, we're actually not doing this, I'd be like, fine.
yeah, I'm only here for the 0.5,
yeah,
really.
You know what? Fuck it. This episode's over, right? We're not watching it. We're going home. Bye. Turn it off right now. No, we'll power through for you guys. I do like how they put M. Night's name in the trailer. I remember at one point of his career, I think it was after this, when he made After Earth with Will Smith, they just stopped putting his name in trailers because, like, he was weirdly, this was like 3 or 4 movies into him, like, no longer being a bankable director, but they're still putting his name. But if I was watching this and I was thinking, oh, a new M. Night Shyamalan film, this looks nothing like an M. Night Shyamalan film. This couldn't be further from looking like an M. Night Shyamalan film.
Who?
Well, he clearly wasn't. Yeah, he was clearly proud enough to put his name on the trailer, wasn't he?
Well, I think the studios just stopped letting him put his name on the trailers. They were just like, you are cinema poison, and this was kind of the last nail in that coffin, I think, because I'm pretty sure After Earth came out after this. And I remember they were like, right, you're not a bankable director anymore. You can make us films, but you can't put your name on. Fuck that noise.
There was nothing in that trailer either that lent to sort of like a comedy or a heartwarming aspect. And I know obviously you've only got a trailer. I know it's only a minute and a half.
You are absolutely correct.
But that is such a big part of what Avatar is. Like it just looked like a bit.
How do we feel about all the white people in
is
the film?
going to piss you, right? I know we're saying this about whitewashing, right? But I want Jack Black to play Uncle Iroh.
That's pretty whitewashing.
He'd be so good at it.
One thing that I do pick is I really like the actor who plays Zuko in this, Dev Patel. I think he's... Sorry, Hannah's being attacked by some invisible force.
Bloodbending.
You gotta feel bad for Dev Patel.
Yeah, the actor who plays Zuko, Dev Patel, he was the guy in Slumdog Millionaire. He was kind of riding a really big high of his career at this point, and he's a massive fan.
Well into Atla. Like, he loves it, and he feels really bad about being Zuko.
For the audience who doesn't know what Atla is, and for Liam who doesn't know what Atla is...
Oh, it's just a shortened version of
Avatar, The Last Airbender.
Atla.
I probably should have been able to figure that out from the context, but I didn't. Yeah, he was a massive fan, and he's looked back and said... I think his exact words were, yeah, that was kind of shit, wasn't it? That was his exact look back at the film. And bless him, if he was a massive fan, it would have been nice for someone to get something out of it.
I bet he was so excited as well for the project.
Yeah.
And you realise it's shit and you're in too deep and you can't really pull out now, you know?
I think this is the one we're going into with the most amount of just, why are we doing this to us?
Yeah, I'm not looking
I see the hate in everyone's eyes.
Right,
I was going to say, if you're a sadist and want to watch the movie with us, I think it's free on Netflix.
It better be free.
Well, not free, but available.
Yeah, you've got to pay. You've got to pay with your time.
Free.
You've got to pay with your time and your fucking soul.
Right, let's get this over with.
Right, guys. Yes, we will see you in a few minutes. Turn the podcast off. Put the film on if you're a fucking sadist, and we will see you soon.
Hello, my Coney Island baby.
Hello, my God, time gone. I can't remember the words.
Well, that was fucking shit.
Overall excited for book 2.
I can't wait.
I had to just give the biggest death stare, like, don't even joke.
It's coming out
don't
any
even
day
joke.
now.
But I do love how the movie opens. We've just come back from watching The Last Airbender. We're all angry.
Angry.
Angry. I do want to mention, I love how the movie opens with that like title screen, book 1, because it was so fucking confident. I love the level of confidence, the egos involved. Like, yeah, we're gonna have a book 2 and a book 3. No. Yeah, that was total bullshit. 90 minutes of just absolute, I barely even qualify as a movie.
Nah, it was pure boredom. It was just scene after scene of nice sets. Really nice sets.
The only good
nice sets.
You can talk. Yeah.
Only compliment I have for that
the only
film.
compliment even anyone can level against this film. Really, really quickly, like, that's the first time you two have seen it, right? We've seen this before. And yeah, it's as bad as I remember. As massive fans, like, if you had to
That was offensive.
Yeah, I would probably say it is bordering on offensive. It's not like a case of where you're a fan of something you watch and think, oh, that's kind of a shit version.
I can't believe I've wasted my fucking Saturday on this.
Okay, the question, Jack.
It's sunny outside, Liam.
Cats. Last Airbender or Cats? You had to pick one. You're in a
Cats. I would watch Cats a million times over.
Jack's not convinced.
That kept me awake with pure rage.
Yeah. You didn't fall asleep. We didn't even put a bet on. But yeah, so I think, if anything, at least Cats isn't destroying a property you love. Like, at least Cats isn't taking a huge shit over. Like, no one gives a shit about Cats the musical, let's be honest. Apart from furries. Do you want to start by doing our 30-second... Not that we want to summarise this film, but 30-second summary?
Yeah. Water, earth, fire, air.
Magnets.
My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days, a time when when the Avatar kept balance between the Water Tribe, Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, and Air Nomads.
He's going to do the whole show.
All changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements.
Is he going to do the whole show?
Only he could stop the ruthless firebenders. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. 100 years have passed, and the Fire Nation is nearing a victory in the war. 2 years ago, my father and the men of my tribe journeyed to the Earth Kingdom to help fight against the Fire Nation, leaving me and my brother to look after our tribe. Some people.
He's doing the whole show.
Some people believe that the Avatar was never reborn into the Air Nomads and that the cycle is broken, but I haven't lost hope. I still believe that somehow the Avatar will return to save the world.
Thanks. Thanks.
That wasn't even the synopsis. He turns up 100 years later, they travel about, he learns how to bend, and he saves the world.
No, he does not learn how to bend. He's sort of semi...
He learns how to move around and make,
No, none of them could be classed as, like, bending.
Right, yeah.
Like,
First big disparaging difference between the show and... I think the biggest difference between the show and the movie is just how fucking awful all of the bending is.
He'll wave his hands around for 30 seconds and then it's like a fart. It's just like... It's done.
I remember mentioning on part one of this podcast, talking about the scene in the Earthbending Village where it takes like 8 people to slowly move a boulder from one side of the room to the next. Like, it's just embarrassing.
Yeah, because it's based on like different styles of martial arts in the show. And I think the distinction between based on martial arts, where every other movement will do something, versus an actual full martial art routine to get the smallest effect.
If it took that long to bend anything, it just wouldn't be used. Your armies would be totally different. They wouldn't be built on your ability to bend. And what is with the firebenders? Why can they not produce their own fire? 2 seconds while I go light my sconce and then we can have a battle.
So just for a bit of context there, in the animated series, firebenders can produce fire. Whereas in this, they always need to have a fucking handy torch nearby, which totally nullifies the use of the power, except Iroh, who can because he's OP. But again, the Fire Nation would be fucking shit if they
just put it out.
Put the fire out.
Just put the fire out.
Oh shit! You picked up on the fact that they're literally worse than stormtroopers. They have no intimidation tactics. They can't. There's like 20 of them versus one small child.
And they just let them walk out into a corner. Like, oh yeah, you pick your fight. You have your fight here where we're going. Yeah, that's good.
None of the nations have a good army. They're all shit.
Okay, let's take it all the way back to the start of the film then. Let's go from, we are introduced to our protagonists, Katara and Sokka. Or is Katara and Sokka? They're two of the names.
Sokka.
Maybe they were doing a water pun. Maybe it was a joke. It just went completely Sokka. Jason was it Jackson Rathbone, the actor who plays Sokka?
The one who looks about fucking 30.
Yeah, he's got a full title.
Absolutely murdered Sokka.
You can see like the beard. Like he turns and you can see the stubble and things. He's meant to be like 16.
All of the actors are atrocious. Like, there's not a performance in this that I can point to and say that person wasn't awful. Maybe some of the Fire Nation people, but the ones they've cast as the protagonists, they're just the most wooden, uninteresting, dead behind the eyes. Like, there's no humanity to them. There's no character to them. I don't know whether I can fully blame the actors or whether this is Shyamalan's script or whether this is
the direction as well. Though, like that was a conscientious choice. There was a scene we were counting. Going. It was like a 25-second piece of dialogue going, no one's blinked. No one's fucking blinked. This is
until you do all the blinking the ones at the end.
Shyamalan looked at them
more wooden than fucking Pinocchio.
Well, again, if we're comparing this to, because this is the one that has the least in common with most of the Shyamalan films, but Ryan, you've seen The Happening, and a lot of these scenes remind me of Mark Wahlberg staring off, dead-eyed, at a fake plant and pretending to have a conversation with it. It is that, like, almost like Shyamalan doesn't know what a real human being looks like. That comparison we made on the first couple episodes where it's like, this feels like it's from the perspective of someone who doesn't know how to acts or like an alien directing a film. But they do try and give Sokka the comedy relief moments that he would get in the anime. But I do think Jason Rathbone or Jackson Rathbone, whatever.
Two. He gets like two moments.
What were those 2 moments?
It's not.
I can't
He tried to make a joke at UA that I don't remember what it was, and
I've literally just watched the film, and
he did something.
I feel like my memory's trying to blank it out.
I think Sokka was the most butchered character in many ways, though, because in the show he's funny, he's very intelligent, he's the man with a plan, typically, and in that there was just no characterization whatsoever. He wasn't funny, he wasn't smart,
angsty teen.
Yeah, he was always just like, "This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea. Oh, you're always hot. This is a bad idea." That was all he had. There was no substance to him.
No, you're right. Sokka is maybe if Sokka's the most butchered, then Katara is the most irritating. Because I had to pause the film at one point. I was so fucking irritated with how she is the mayor of Exposition City. She lives dead center in Exposition City, and she narrates scenes that we are watching happen in real time. It's a little bit later on in the film, but when they get to the Northern Water Tribe, when they get to the part where they need to go, they're entering the Water Tribe and they bow to the Royal Council or whatever. And as they're bowing, Katara's narrated.
We bow to the Royal Council.
We bowed, like as if it's like was it like one of those audio descriptive films for blind people, but they just forgot to take the audio description off.
I think that's a big problem with this film is telling rather than showing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, my dad gave me the scar in an Agni Kai, and an Agni Ki, sorry, because they put I don't know whether it's like a language barrier thing or what. But
no, it's
every one is mispronounced from like the English TV. I don't know whether or not it's a translation error or what.
I think it's more of a Shyamalan didn't watch the show error.
Yeah, I said that. Is it like
just read it off a script and said whatever popped into his head.
Because what is it? They say Agni Ki, Ong, Sokka. What was the other big one?
Iro,
yeah. Which again, talking about characters getting butchered.
Well, like the Agni Kai thing, though, it's like, oh, my dad fought me in a fight and he gave me the scar. And it's like, do you want to maybe show us? maybe show us. That sounds interesting. Why don't you show us that?
Yeah, you have characters, and again, you have characters delivering exposition to characters who already lived that bit of exposition, so it's only for the sake of the audience. You're having these conversations where Zuko is like describing how he got banished. This kid's describing how Zuko got banished, and it's like, yeah, you're Zuko. You know how you got banished. Who is this for? It's only for the audience, and it's just so disjointed and so kind of shoved in there just for the sake of exposition. Because again, this is a 23 episode season they're cramming into an hour and a half.
It's just got no love. It's just got no heart. Yeah. It's just what did you say? You said it was like a
synopsis.
Thank you.
Oh, a summary, right? It felt like a live action summary of the first season.
And that was spot on. Like I felt nothing. And it's like like a live action summary where they got some of it wrong.
Yeah.
You're better off watching season 2, episode 1 of Avatar, where it goes previously on Avatar.
If you want to catch up on book 1.
Every scene feels really quickly to get over with. You've got a large scene at the beginning at the Water Tribe where they find Ong. And that's a good 5 minutes of a solid set. And then it goes into a montage. Then you've got 2 minutes at Air Temple. Then you have another montage. Then they get to the Water Tribe and have another montage. Then they have...
Even Rocky had a montage.
Then they have the last battle.
It is 90% exposition and montages, and maybe 5% relatively cool shit if you've never seen. I do wonder how perspective of this if you hadn't seen the anime.
What did you think? You hadn't seen it?
Well, I was a teenager as well. I remember it being bullshit, but I'm thinking is it more or less bullshit that you have if you have seen the anime first?
See, I went into this thinking the characters are going to be butchered, the characterization is going to be bad, the plot's going to be bad, but at least the fight scenes will be good. That was my perspective going into this. I thought, well, at least the fight might be interesting, and I couldn't have been more wrong.
Yeah, I was worried going into this that they would focus so much on the sort of the fights and the animation of the bending that they would ignore the characters, and instead they just ignored both.
They ignored everything. They ignored it being a movie. You're right, because none of the action scenes, the big action scenes, the things that you're right, we're building up to these awesome bending, we have these powers. None of the people in the fight scenes use the powers. Maybe every once in a while they'll use their bending to open a gate or put out a light or just something bullshit.
And what annoyed me, right? So Aang never had an issue with waterbending, and it was such a big plot story in that he had to let go of his past and grieve and all this sort of stuff because otherwise he couldn't waterbend. Bollocks!
Bollocks is the only way. There's this big aspect of the film where you're right, you're expecting the bending to come in because you're right, you've got this £150 million budget. Where was that money spent apart from the sets, which look pretty
That
cool?
was it. That was where the money
The
went.
sets were cool. I literally didn't recognize a single actor in it, so it can't have been on a big A-list cast.
Nothing massive. Like
got Dev Patel.
Dev Patel was big-ish at the time, but not huge. He was like maybe on his second big film.
Did you say he was an
Millionaire.
Avatar fan?
He was a massive
he's
fan,
a
and
fan.
and again, I think he was trying quite hard, but again, the material that they give him, it's hard to make that sound convincing.
He was probably the most convincing of the cast.
Yeah.
I think him, then Iroh, then the rest
bit
are
of
all
passion to
bottom
him,
tier.
didn't he?
So the least convincing of the cast is obviously
the white people. Genuinely, we need to talk about this.
Well, like, Ong is not a mischievous little air spirit that's free and fancy and flighty and likes to run about and cause mischief, but also has to save the world. He's an angsty little kid who spends the entire film trying to get over his past, and you see none of the levity of Aang.
Because none of the characters have any substance, because they tried to cram 24 episodes of television into a fucking hour and a half. Who could have guessed that wouldn't work?
I think it's a stretch even calling them characters. I think that's a massive lenience to even call them characters.
I would have preferred them just take out all that middle bit where they visit the Earth Kingdom and the Air Temple.
Yeah.
Scratch that and just take us our main story points. At least give us some more times getting to know people.
Also, let's captive a load of bloody earthbenders and put them in an earth prison.
Yeah, it's just nonsensical
Stone walls,
decisions.
Earth floor, it's fine. They'll never escape from here.
But again, it just lends to the fact that you can tell this is a project from someone who has zero interest. His kids liked it. That
You're
was his
absolutely
entire,
right. Like,
yeah.
Southland Tales might be shit, but you can tell a lot of love went into it.
Yeah.
You know, you can tell
It's
with some of these
wonderful
projects.
shit.
Yeah, you can tell with some of these projects. It might not be like critically popular or commercially popular
Or
or
even
just
make any
popular
sense.
at all or make sense. But the director gave a shit.
Yeah.
And it's just so obvious that no one on this really gave a toss about it, except maybe the set designers and whoever did the score, because the score was genuinely quite good at times.
It was fine.
There was bits where you're like, oh, this feels like it's building to something.
Yeah,
And then
felt
it
like
was
the score
just...
was better than the movie.
The score didn't know what movie it was scoring. You're right, I was looking at this.
It built to nothing.
Stunning, like, gorgeous scene of Aang, like, moving his hands around a bit, and I'm like, what's happening? Is this something... The bit where they were doing, like,
That's
this,
what we're expecting.
this chi
Katara
thing.
and Aang were doing this whole Carter routine. And epic sweeping music sounded majestic and beautiful. We were waiting for the swirls of water to bring us some joy. And there was nothing. It
You
ended
literally
with
turned to me, you were like, did they forget to put the CG in? Like, is there a... But, like, speaking of the CG, can we talk about the absolute horror monstrosity that is Appa? Who again, like, they had a reasonable budget. They had a decent, like, the fur technology looked fine. Like, the actual body looked okay.
And this was when? 2011, did you say?
2011, yeah.
So CGI was pretty competent back then.
Yeah.
Was this like, when did actual, like, Blue Man Avatar come out?
That was 2009, right?
So that's the because that was like the benchmark for CGI, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, how else
I'm
would
just
you?
thinking of Tobias from
How
I
else would
blew
you?
myself.
You know, we're on a podcast talking about a different film called Avatar. How else was I meant to
That's a
describe?
good point. Blue Cap.
But you know, that was like the benchmark for CGI, wasn't
Yeah,
it? That was
yeah.
like how good it can
He
be.
changed the game, really, yeah.
And then you see this 2 years later, which again, it doesn't have the excuse of a small budget like some of the films we've discussed. This was a big budget film, and the CGI was just dog shit.
Appa needed to be put down immediately.
He had a face like where the wild things are. And then the rest of it is it just the proportions were wrong. Momo didn't look as bad.
It wasn't great.
It was just the faces. The bodies looked okay, but the
Yeah.
faces were just fucked.
horrifying.
Absolutely.
Like the same as the CGI bending though. Like it's so slow moving. Everything's so very direct. It feels like they couldn't get the CGI to manipulate things. Like, oh, we can't make a torrent of water twist in a certain way because the CGI won't allow that. Or we can't make fire spread. It has to go in a very specific pattern, otherwise it's going to get away from us.
The main issue you can derive from it is the fact that, the animated TV show is bright, it's beautifully drawn, it has that clear line style, and it's an absolute pleasure to watch.
And it's a perfect blend
The very
between
nature
fun
of
and adults.
Yeah.
It is the very nature of animation to make that absurd visual style and those absurd visuals, those the unachievable action sequences that you can only get in an animation plausible. Whereas here, they do try and make the action sequences lavish, and they make them kind of want to stand out a little bit.
There's
But it
also
doesn't.
some bad choices in there though. Like when they go to kick a pebble, it takes 5 kicks. on the first kick, raise the pebble. Second kick, send it flying. Third kick, get another one in the air. Don't wait 10 moves into doing something before you give us something visual to look at.
And the powers are neutered to the point of being embarrassing. You're right. Like what it takes 4 people to do here, one person could have easily done.
Azula can basically fly.
Well, yeah, she can. But when you go go, like, in the series, when you go into each of the kingdoms, you can see how the kingdoms sort of thrive off their bending. Like, so you go to the Earth kingdoms, and they've got that whole parcel system where they say the Earth bending takes it up and gravity takes it down. And, like, they work to their advantage because it is a part of who they are. Like, bending isn't something that they have to do a dance so that they get a little flame. Like, it's it's an actual sort of like an extension of them. And there was just none of that in this. Like,
there's no attention to world building whatsoever, really.
all.
The only bit you see is them closing a water gate behind them. That's the most like attention. Yeah, but that's the best bit you get in terms of like world building, attention to detail, the use of their bending as part of their civilization and their social hierarchy. You're right, Hannah. It's just loveless, isn't it? There's no attention to detail, and attention to detail is what made the show so fucking good.
I think it's what you can. The only way you can truly adapt a source material with such lavish lore in it is if you are a fan of it. That is the biggest takeaway. You're right, Jack. But before you can tell Shyamalan has no love for this. And it's just an absolute travesty.
It's an empty mess.
Can we talk really quickly about the big bad of this? Because we're led to believe that Zuko's the big bad through a lot of it. It's kind of the misdirect, but the real big bad, Fire Lord Ozai, being the least intimidating villain of all time.
You don't see his face in the first season. It might be the end of the first season you see, but throughout the actual episodes of the show,
it's like a silhouette.
It's just silhouette.
Yeah, because it's
by flames.
Again, it's given that really sinister vibes. This guy, you find him walking down a corridor, and he looks like he's like Dave, 43, drives a minivan, has 4 kids, works in like a middle management IT job, and lives in the suburbs.
Yeah.
You know, like bit of a spare tire, likes to barbecue, likes to watch the football. You know, fucking
there's
like,
no
vacuous. There's no threat.
We're led to believe this man has conquered the most of the world and has studied martial arts every day his entire life. And he's just walking around like, oh yeah, I got barbecue this afternoon.
His body language, his presence, his appearance, there's nothing threatening about him at all. And it's really, really disappointing because he is done so well by Mark Hamill. So, sorry, I'm not allowed to mention Star Wars again. When
I wasn't the one who came at you, remember? Who did that? It was Hannah.
Mark Hamill is a superb voice actor, though. As we talked about in the Batman series,
he's fantastic.
An unreal Joker, and he has that gravitas and that real threatening voice. And again, like, you go to see him in the palace, and there's just like that wall of fire behind him, and it's like, fuck, you know? And in this, it looks like a room divider. It looks like, or like a privacy screen that a lady might get changed behind it, like an old timey. It looks shit.
Yeah, it feels like he's going to get voted out.
Let's be honest. The true villain of this film is M. Night Shyamalan. It's just the most meta film ever, where we're just meant to root against M. Night and just hate everything. There's no real positives apart from the sets, which we're mentioning, but that's expected in a 150 million.
Absolutely.
It's not a positive. It's just you hit the bare minimum.
That's just due diligence.
Yeah, that's just.
I honestly thought as they were going through it, well, okay, they've sped past this, we've montaged through an hour, right? So we're clearly going to build to something, and it gets to the final fight scene, and in the first book, it is an epic episode.
We watched it. We put the scene on afterwards to remind ourselves of how good it is. But again, I think what a lot of the cartoon does and what a lot of the anime does is it has that interesting visual style where it's not afraid to put something that might be slightly absurd or might be slightly silly in a live action setting onto the screen, and it doesn't look silly. It looks fucking badass.
But they've spent their time so poorly. You've got an hour and 40, which isn't long enough to tell a good story like this anyway when you try to do a big fantasy epic. And then they focus on things like, oh, we'll do the blue spirit thing, but it doesn't add anything to the plot, really, in this film.
I was expecting them to do exposition on that, and for Zuko to be like, oh, I only rescued the Avatar so I could capture him myself to regain my honor, and that didn't come up.
No, and
I don't think he asked him I don't think he said that he needed to regain his honor once. He said he needed to regain his power.
But again, why didn't you spend that time actually doing, character development or world building or scene setting or something that actually makes us engage and engrossed in this world? Because I couldn't give 2 flying fucks about what happened to anyone in that. And you're right with we briefly rewatched bits of the final of book 1 there just to recap and just remember how good it could have been. And that bit with Zhao where he gets taken and Zuko tries to save him, and again it's showing that redemptive arc, that good side of him, and there's just zero characterization in this.
So I thought when they got to the Water Tribe, they would spend more time exploring that and letting us see what happens while they're there, because this is clearly what they've been gearing up to, because we've skipped everything else in 30-second snippets. But then Katara says, oh yeah, Sokka and Yue start getting sweet on each other. We spend some time here, we get good. While they've been here for quite some time, Aang finally gets a chance to actually do some bending and spar, which he's never done while he's been here, apparently. Skip through all that again, skip, and then we get the conclusion. Yue dies, and I'm like, I've seen her twice.
Yeah.
She said about 4 words. Why do I give a shit if she's dead?
The absolute audacity they have to try and get us to believe that Yue and Sokka have any romantic connection whatsoever after the 10 seconds we get to spend with them on screen.
After the smile they've shared.
Yeah, we're meant to have this massive emotional response to her sacrifice, and it's just like, right, okay, bye.
Then again, like, I can think of a few examples. The first one that springs to mind is like, what was his name? Haldir in Helm's Deep or something in Lord of the Rings. That elf, he's on screen for about 5 minutes, but you give a shit when he dies. It's not impossible.
Because they're real people, but
like,
they've made them believe in...
Yeah, it's not like having no screen time necessarily means you can't have an emotional response to that. It felt deep when that happened. It felt sad and somber. With that, you just couldn't give a rat's ass about that,
Because they were trying to force us to catch feelings for her very quickly and unsuccessfully.
It was heartless and flat. It missed like everything that Avatar is about. It missed compassion. It missed friendship. It didn't go into sort of like the philosophical questions that Avatar gets you to because that's what's so beautiful about Avatar. It strings that very fine line between sort of some very kind of
mature,
issues and moral grey areas, but also that funny comedy aspect of it all and the serious. It all blends together brilliantly. Whereas this was just, it was flat. Nothing.
We are going to have to talk about the elephant in the room. And that is...
The movie.
Well, the movie... the fact that...
Shyamalan, all the main cast are white.
Yeah.
And all the bad guys are...
It's so... And I know we are a room of white people and we probably aren't the best authority on this, but it's so uncomfortable that all the good people are white and all the bad people are people of colour.
Especially in the Southern Water Tribe. I think that might have been the biggest...
It would, I don't know if it would be as off-putting if originally, like, obviously Sokka and Katara are meant to be Inuits. They definitely come from that kind of... area of the world, and then Aang is meant to be of Asian descent, but no, white people. They're just white people.
What was weird as well, though, is literally everyone else in the village were like looked Inuit or like of that sort of.
But they were main characters.
Not the main family.
But then it's them and their white nana who just like it just feels so out of place, doesn't it? And then you said it, like every other like everyone else who's not a main character is of some sort of color of some description.
Yeah.
And it's just fucking classic whitewashing, isn't it? The main cast are white, despite the fact it makes no sense.
It's like the film was made by the Aryan nation of filmmakers. It's so fucking awful. You're right, but again, like you think a director who's American Indian, like he's kind of, I think he made his first film that he made was about his experiences in. This was before Sixth Sense, about his experiences as an Indian in America, and you think he would have some kind of sensitivity about this as a topic. Like it just feels so. Poorly handled, let's say. It feels like it's just... I don't think it was necessarily meant to be outwardly offensive, per se, but it definitely feels like it's a misjudged moment that came off just awful.
It was just shocking to see on screen, though, wasn't it? Like, it was sort of jarring to see...
This film's on a really weird mind-time warp in my head. In my head, there's like 3 scenes. You've got the beginning where they're in the Water Tribe.
Yep.
Aang gets captured.
Yep.
Yep.
And then you have the end, and then everything in between that.
I couldn't tell you what happened.
It's just kind of like
there was a bit. They went to 2 air temples.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then.
Oh fuck yeah.
And then there was a montage of them like doing stuff, and then skip to the Water Tribe. Sorry, skip to
the first air temple.
Yeah,
this is easily
skip to the North Pole.
The worst film we've done.
I think it's the worst film we've done. I think with you, Hannah. I think I'd rather watch Cats again because at least Cats has that like fascination value as what is happening. Why is this amalgamation of horrible colours on my screen, whereas this is just dull in every aspect.
I've always said when it comes to sort of like films and such, there is a certain like, as long as you are entertained in some sort of way, then it ticks some sort of box. Yeah. It is entertainment at the end of the day. That was not entertainment.
Again, I feel like it's a stretch to even call this a movie. This is in its most literal sense. Yeah, it's literally a movie, but I can't... there's no like magic or joy or anything that you'd expect when you go see a movie, or even humour. It's a moving picture, but I don't want to call it a film because again, like on a scale of 1 to 10, this is at least a -4 as far as entertainment values. Like it's just abysmal. There's nothing to it.
I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I wasn't entertained. I didn't care about the characters. Can we please stop talking about this film?
Honestly, I want done so I can do the point.
Should we wrap up? Should we wrap up? Let's do a quick wrap up of our final thoughts.
Favorite scenes, everybody.
The credits.
The end. Yeah.
The credits.
I quite like the bit where Katara hit the ball and just slapped her back and just bitch slapped her away.
Actually, no, the 5 airbenders with the one
rock.
Oh, the earthbenders.
That was the only time any of us laughed, so there is that element. Yeah, I guess that made us laugh, but again, unintentionally. Yeah, incredibly dull the entire way through. Would hesitate to call it even a movie.
Yep.
That's my takeaway.
Boo.
Big massive boo. It's not. You're right. It's not even enjoyable in the sense of you can shout at the screen, because we were fucking shouting at the screen the entire time, like wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. But there's no joy even to get from that. It's just frustration. Yeah, fucking sucks.
I wouldn't tell anybody to watch this because they're going to have a good time watching it. How bad it is. It is just either dull or, if you're a fan, infuriating.
Yeah,
and that's the only two emotions you can come away from this film with.
I can't even, as an M. Night fan, say there's anything. There's no M. Night flair to it. There's no M. Night stamp on it. Even for him, who's, yeah, fair enough, he's egotistical, he's narcissistic, or whatever. Even he wouldn't act in this movie. Even he was like, this is the one where I'm not going to do a cameo. I don't want to be seen in this horrible movie, this movie I'm making. Yeah, it sucks. Don't watch it. Anyone want to wrap up with any more thoughts, or are we ready to...
No, please let it end.
I will say, I feel bad for the actress who plays Azula. You see her at the end, she gets a big gear up, like, oh, she's coming in the next movie, guys.
Again, I love the confidence this film has. Totally misguided confidence.
Her dreams were destroyed before they began.
Yeah.
That was it. Like Lord of the Rings and the Dark Knight and stuff. It's like, yeah, trilogies are the fun. Trilogies are where the money's at, aren't they? Yeah.
Watch anything else. Thanks for listening, guys. Next week we'll have our point 5 where we cover the the exciting one where we cover the TV show and a little bit of the history of the wider universe of Avatar. The week after that, fingers crossed, we will be joined by our wonderful friends over at the Warm Tin podcast. We're getting Tom on to watch one of my favourite horror films of all time, 13 Ghosts.
Yes,
we're going back to an experience that you will at least enjoy because it's fucking hilarious.
He hasn't seen this yet, has he?
I don't think these two have seen it either. Tom hasn't seen it. I know Tom hasn't seen it. I know these two haven't seen it. It's very much just bonkers for the sake of being bonkers.
Been a good time.
I haven't watched The Green Mile. I haven't watched
Sixth Sense.
I haven't watched Shawshank Redemption, but I'm having to watch this fucking bullshit.
Girls, baby.
I'm regretting my choices.
Yeah, but thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for continuing to listen to us. We are just getting more and more of you listeners every single time we post an episode, and it just makes me so happy. Do give us some love over on Instagram. I'll be entirely honest, Instagram's kind of the only place I actually advertise anymore because most of you guys are on Instagram. But if you also have Twitter, you can follow us there, and Facebook. But you know, whatever. Yeah, let's just put this horrible nightmare out of our minds, and let's get some fun. Let's get some fun. Let's go out and enjoy the sun for a bit.
Yes, next week is going to be epic.
See you then.
Bye.